right, so we're live now.
Thank you, Jasmine. So welcome everybody to our special meeting. I will now call to order this special meeting of council held under section 26 of the Planning Act on this 9th day of September 2020. Council provided notice of this special meeting in the local newspaper for 2 consecutive weeks on July the 29th, 2020 and August the 5th, 2020, in accordance with the prescribed notice requirements. The purpose of this official plan review is to update the existing official plan policies to conform to the provincial policy statement, the PPS 2020, and the Lanark County Sustainable Communities Official Plan, as well as to consider comments by the public and agencies. The Planning Act requires that the township update its 2010 official plan at least 10 years after it was first adopted and every 5 years after that. As the township continues to develop and change, it is important to review the effectiveness of the official plan to ensure it is still achieving the township's goals and objectives. The public's input is very important. This meeting provides township residents with an opportunity to participate in the shaping of the future direction for Montague Township. All those registered to address council will be invited to present your opinion on what official plan improvements or updates should be considered by council following the presentation of the planning report by our consultant. Please note, we are not making any decisions tonight, but reviewing a report and providing direction. This is just the beginning, and it's going to be a long process with lots of opportunity from the public. I'm now going to ask our consultant to, I guess before I do that, we have a couple of motions, but then I will ask the consultant to present his planning report. But first, I have a couple of motions here. The first one was moved by Karen Jennings and seconded by Jeff Carroll, that the special meeting of council agenda dated September the 9th, 2020 be approved as circulated. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. And so now I'm going to go to our consultant, Forbes Simon from JP2G. And welcome to you, Forbes. And we look forward to your report. And I will hand this part of the meeting over to you now. So thank you, Forbes. And welcome to our planner, Carol. Hi, Carol. So thank you, Forbes. I'll let you take over now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, Council. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening, even if it is virtual. It is the way that we're doing business right now. It's not ideal, but it is the method that the province of Ontario has recognized as an acceptable way of doing business in this time of the COVID pandemic. And I want to reiterate what the mayor said. This is the beginning of a 6-month planning process. And the public is going to have multiple opportunities to be engaged and have input as we go through this. And this is just more or less notice that the project has started. I did submit to you, Mr. Mayor, and Council, a formal report. It's dated September 29th. It's addressed to the Mayor and Council, and it's from myself, Forbes Simon. I'm the senior planner with the consulting firm JP2G Consultants, Inc. And we've been retained by the township to undertake the official plan review and update. As you indicated in your opening remarks, Mr. Mayor, the Planning Act anticipates that municipalities, once they have official plans, regularly review and update those documents. And there is a prescribed process under the Planning Act to have this exercise completed in a fair and open and transparent way. One of the first steps is to hold a special meeting of council that's intended to provide the public with an opportunity to be involved in this discussion that you're having. My report that I've presented to you this evening, I'm not going to read it verbatim. It is a matter of public record. It will be posted on the township's website under the official plan update page that's been created. But there are a couple of points in the report that I think are important this evening to review. The first is that the township's official plan is 10 years old. It is an appropriate time as set out in the Planning Act to review the official plan and to make sure that the policies are still relevant and reflect the best planning principles that can be stated at this time. There are a couple of important components that an official plan update and review must touch upon. The first is that the province has provincial plans and provincial planning policies that are updated on a regular basis. Most recently, the province updated their provincial policy statement on planning in the beginning of this year, 2020. And municipalities are required under the Planning Act to be consistent with provincial policy statements. And so with the new document coming out, now is an appropriate time to look to make sure that the official plan is in step with the provincial policy statement. The other thing is that the County of Lanark's Sustainable Communities official plan was adopted in 2012, 2 years after your official plan. And it's also a requirement that a lower tier official plan conform to the upper tier official plan. And so part of this review looks at the county's planning documents, ensures that your policies are in step with the county's document. So being in step with the provincial policy statement, being in step with the county's official plan are two key elements of this review. The third component is to make sure that you, as elected officials within the community, have an opportunity to express your opinions about the official plan and what's working and what isn't working, what parts of it need to be enhanced, and if there are any new directions the township feels that you should be going in. And then the fourth component is the public's right to participate and express their opinion as to the state of the official plan and how it could be improved or changed for the future of the municipality. So the project that we've initiated is intended to address all four of those points. The big part of the project is, in terms of looking after compliance with provincial policies, is reaching out to the government agencies, whether it's the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Parks. They've all been notified of this project and they've been asked to participate. Agencies and organizations such as the school boards, surrounding municipalities have all been notified that this project is in the process of starting. We've also reached out to the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority, and also Parks Canada. And finally, we've reached out to 2 of the identified First Nations that have an interest in the Township Montague. The agency comments that we've received to date have not been comprehensive. We've, again, it's just the beginning of a discussion, but we have received a number of comments, and they are attached to the report as an appendice, and will be added to as additional comments come in over time. One part of the project that I particularly enjoyed was the opportunity to speak to each of the councillors and to Jasmine and to Carl and your chief building official as well, Jim, and to get your sort of feet in the ground view of the township and how the official plan is working. And I was impressed with the comments that were given and the thoughtfulness and the desire by all of council to make Montague Township the best it can be and prepare itself for future growth pressures that continue to evolve and change in Eastern Ontario. The public comments, we're asking this evening, Mr. Mayor, that council provide the public an opportunity to have their input up until September 30th. We have to pick some date to be able to close off this initial review process. And we're hopeful that we could have public comments by the end of the month. I've been in discussions with Jasmine about having a follow-up notice in the paper next week that would again highlight the project and request comments from the public by September 30th. That doesn't mean that that's the end of their opportunity to be engaged. There will be many opportunities for them as we proceed going forward to express their opinions. I would like, Mr. Mayor, now to highlight the 12 preliminary issues that have been identified to date. I think it's important for everybody to understand that these are just issues, and how the issues are addressed and the changes made to the official plan have not been determined yet. This is just putting on the board the things that we need to look at. The first one is a very clear expression by pretty well everybody that there needs to be an opportunity to expand and diversify the commercial and industrial base of the township. There's also a desire to make sure that the industrial and commercial areas are visually attractive, which stimulates future investment. There's also this idea that we need to look at expanded opportunities for people to work at home, whether it's in a hamlet setting or in a rural or agricultural setting, and expanding the opportunities for people to live and work at home. And it's probably no more important that we do it than this day and age when everybody is pretty well working at home, or many of us have been. There is also an expression that the township has a lot of scattered residential development, and there's a desire to promote more urban areas, expand or have the hamlets grow. And to do so, it was indicated that communal services are important to being able to have a higher density of development, more in keeping with what you see in urban areas, you need to have something other than private services to be able to help you achieve those goals. The idea of Rosedale being a prime location for increased development activity came up. It's got the township office, it's got schools, it's very good highway connections, and it's been designated and has had some subdivision development in the past, and promoting that and enhancing that is certainly came out through our discussions. There's also the idea of exploring the development potential of the serviced area of Rideau Avenue lands as well. One of the ideas is to promote subdivisions versus consents. Subdivisions are a more efficient way of proceeding with growth and development than one-off scattered residential severances. It's not to say that there would be no more severances. It's just that promoting an emphasis maybe on subdivisions more in key areas of the township. There's also certain areas where development has been taking place that is difficult for the township to service. Pinery Road came up multiple times as an area where it's stretching the capacity of the township to have more development in that area. We haven't explored it in detail yet, and we need to do that in the future. The other thing is that there is a lot of area of the township where severances have already been taken, and that there's no room for, or there's no potential for additional development in those areas. And there was a desire to see maybe those areas where the number of severances has been maxed out, to see if there is potential for additional development in those areas. You've had a lot of discussion to date with your planner, Carl, regarding secondary dwelling units. You've initiated that conversation, and we're proposing to roll that into this project and come forward with policies consistent with the direction that's been expressed. Carl's reports have been spot on, and they've used, as an example, the work that's been done in Tay Valley Township, which has been not just a leader in Lanark County, but a leader in Eastern Ontario in terms of advancing policies on secondary dwelling units. And that is something that the township needs to look at in its official plan update. We've also looked at, been asked to look at policies regarding more sustainable development, potential for green energy projects at commercial industrial scale. There's also a desire to have clear understanding and policies that talk about the constraints to development. So many times there are barriers in planning due to language that we need to break free from, and make sure that people clearly understand what's expected of them and what information they need to supply when they are submitting applications for development consideration. One of the big advancements with the provincial policy statement in 2020 was the requirement to have enhanced policies in terms regarding consultation with our First Nation communities. And that would be an element that needs to be addressed in the official plan update as well. There are also policies in terms of wellhead protection and intake protection zones in both Smith Falls and Marrickville that need to be looked at to make sure you as a connecting community are ensuring that their water sources are protected as per provincial legislation. There's also a need to recognize the significance of the Rideau Canal and the policies that protect and benefit the location of the canal within your community. You're very fortunate to have that feature, but it does come with a requirement to protect and enhance. There's also, we've received some updated mineral aggregate mapping from the province that needs to be looked at very carefully to make sure that you're protecting the necessary primary aggregate resources within your community. And finally, there's a need for natural heritage systems mapping. Right now, the township has mapped wetlands and rivers and areas of natural and scientific interest. But the province is now requesting that those areas be connected. There's a lot of times that there's forested areas that connect wetlands and that are pathways for animals to move through. And those need to be picked up in a mapping exercise. And that's part of the work program that we've identified to date for you as well. That was one of the few knowns we had going into this project, was the need for natural heritage system mapping. Mr. Mayor, that's the end of the list of issues. I would like to reiterate that we would like to have public comments by September 30th, if that's possible. Though it's not a hard, fast end date, but it would help with the project management. The next steps going forward is after the end of the consultation period, and when we have the majority of the agency comments in, we would be putting together an issues and options report. What that would do is would highlight the issues, just as we've done here, but also give council some options on how to address those issues. A lot of the times there's ability to go right or left or down the middle when you're dealing with these issues. And that's up to council to decide how to do that. And we'll present those options to you. And you can take those options, you can add to them, you can combine them. We can do lots of different things at that time, but that would set the stage for what changes would actually happen to the official plan. Following that, there will be a formal official plan amendment process, again, open to the public, that would be detailing the exact changes that council is proposing to the official plan. And the agencies and the public will all have an opportunity to participate in that as well. That's all I have to say at this point in time, Mr. Mayor. If there are any questions or comments that come out that you would like me to address, I am here at your disposal.
Well, thank you very much, Forbes. You've certainly delved into this deeply, and so far as a beginning, and we really appreciate it. So I commend you on this initial, very, very first report. I have 2 or 3 questions, but I'm going to open it up to council to let them ask the questions first. But I have a comment just for clarification. On the second page where you wrote about the requirement to review and update the official plan, I suspect that some of this was written before the announcement that I heard this past week, but in your report, you say that it is worth noting that there are no provincial plans in place that affect Montague Township. I thought about one thing, and I'd just like you to comment on this. When I read this, I thought I'd like to suggest that there was one provincial plan that came out in the last few days that we heard about, which I do feel will affect Montague in a fairly substantial way, that being the announcement by the province regarding the new possible jail in Kemptville, North Granville. which was going to have close to 400 beds. So something like that, I would suspect would have an impact. It's just a comment, but if you'd like to comment on that, and then I'm going to open it up to council.
Yeah, that's a provincial initiative. It doesn't constitute what the Planning Act calls a provincial plan, but it's definitely a provincial investment in your neighborhood that's going to have an economic impact, and the community needs to plan and be prepared for that type of growth that comes with those significant public investments.
Thank you. So I'm just going to open it up to council if they have any questions. Seeing none right yet, I'll come back to council in a minute. I have a couple of that I had mentioned here, Forbes. With the communal services, you talk about communal services. Obviously, that means well and septic systems, right?
Yes, they are well and septic systems, but they're designed for 5 or more houses to be serviced from those systems. So they're communal in that there are a number of residents share a well or share the septic system. And
Yeah.
Typically the septic system is quite large and requires agreements with the Ministry of the Environment, Parks, or Environment and Conservation and Parks, and also an agreement with the municipality.
And a question I have also regarding tiny houses. What would be your advice on tiny houses? If we were allowed tiny houses, can tiny houses be allowed off grid?
So I think your planner, Carl, did a very good job in addressing the issue of tiny houses. I would submit to you, Mr. Mayor, that it's semantics. We've always had tiny houses. I would suggest to you that every wartime house that was built in our area is a tiny house by definition. And I think Carl's recommendations in his report, I think, stand, and I wouldn't have too much to add to that. I think they should be allowed to be permitted in the community, and they should be allowed to be off grid just the same as any other house has the ability under the building code to be off grid with appropriate design.
Thank you. Did see Claus, your hand up?
Thank you, Reeves. Just a couple of comments in that you listed these as preliminary list of issues. Are these list of issues or suggestions that we should be looking at?
That's a very good question, Councillor. I've identified them as issues. But they are issues that need to be looked at. And so again, we're playing with language, but traditionally planners, when we identify things like this, we refer to them as issues.
Yeah, okay. I would agree with you, but I call them challenges, especially with the tiny homes. I have this is something we as council have to have a very in-depth discussion. And my main concern is, where are we going to allow these tiny homes to exist? So if you have any suggestions on that, I'd like to hear that. Development, you mentioned about development in Rosedale. There's a section in Rosedale along Rosedale Road heading north from the township hall that a home has gone up, and there's a great big area there that could be developed. The problem is there's still a aggregate pit there that has not been decommissioned. That's going to pose a challenge if we want to promote development in Rosedale along that section there. I come back to some of the emails that we got from residents and so forth, and I really reiterate your comment about public input. the public input has to be very well listened to, understood, and taken to heart as to what the public is looking for us to do. Thank you.
Forbes, another question. Sorry about this, back to the tiny house, but it's just another question. Because you were talking in your report about development on Rideau Avenue. I would like to sort of add in that section there where we're talking about at least having a discussion regarding Rideau Avenue, if we could just add also our business park. As I may have pointed out to you in our consultation, we've tried for years and years to develop the business park. The problem there is that it's near the wellhead and it has no services. And I feel that we would have been able to over the years develop it, but there's no services. Unless we get the services from Smith Falls, it won't be developed. So I've often wondered and thought, would our business park be a good place for tiny houses? If they were there, they're not going to affect anybody. And the beauty, well, I guess it goes to my next question is, would that be a situation where you could introduce the idea of communal wells and septic systems because we don't have services and for tiny houses?
The answer is yes. Communal services would be an option to look at a higher density of development than what you're getting right now. We would have to have a careful look at the compatibility of houses with the commercial industrial activity that's there now. And council would need to make a decision whether they wish to continue to pursue a business park with maybe a different emphasis versus housing. Typically, business parks or industrial parks and housing are not deemed to be compatible. And so if you're going to go down that road, we'd have to be very careful about how it would be done.
I'm only asking because for 4 terms in a row now, and everybody I feel has thought it would be a good idea to develop our business park. But basically there is little or no commercial / industrial development there. So right now there's no development, but that was again another option. But I like your idea about presenting options to us. My last question that I had written down for you was, you talked about modest quantity of growth. I guess I'm just wondering, in your mind, what would you consider to be a modest quantity of growth? Because per capita, I believe that Montague Township was about 2nd out of the 8 municipalities in Lanark County in terms of growth. Percentage wise, per capita, we were, I think, 2nd highest, just behind Beckwith. But and I do believe that I've always believed now that definitely is going to continue, because we're in between Beckwith Carleton Place and North Grenville. We're in between the two, and they're going to eventually sort of crowd out into our municipality. So I think that there's definitely going to be growth. But I'm just wondering, like percentage wise, what do you consider to be a modest quantity of growth?
Yeah, the playing the percentage game is challenging, Bill. You know, if I would suggest that you change the conversation more to the number of new units you would see on an annual basis, as opposed to a percentage of the county growth or things of that nature. And in talking to your staff, they've indicated that right now you've been averaging about 20 new home starts a year, which is an impressive number. And the question is, what would happen if you doubled it? would you be able to continue doing business the way you're doing right now? Would that put additional stresses on your public works infrastructure or your building inspector? Would your planner need to be full-time versus part-time? So when you promote growth, you have to remember that there's two sides to the ledger. One is the new people coming into your community, new tax dollars, but there's also an increased demand for services that come with that. And so I would suggest to you that council needs to come up with an idea of how much additional units per year you would be comfortable with, and then set out a plan to try to achieve that rate, whether it's 30, 40, or 60 new houses a year. And I would suggest that maybe the discussion is about housing units as opposed to percentage of county growth and things of that nature.
Thank you. Any other questions then from council? I do see, oh, now I got three. So I'm going to go to Ian and Karen and Klaus. So Ian first.
Yeah, first, thank you very much, Mr. Forrest, for the report. I want to go back to what Deputy Reed Vandermeer brought up about the public consultation, which is a big piece of all of this. And I think that the biggest challenge is, you know, having these Zoom meetings and everything else. It takes away from that face-to-face value. I think that some of the residents would really like to see. And I'm just wondering how it is that how can we bridge that gap, or how can we better bridge that gap that seems to exist right now. I've had a couple phone calls, you know, and there are people that are definitely interested in having, you know, some type of public consultation that is a little bit more interactive than what we're experiencing right now. So I think that's one of the challenges that we're going to face. The other thing is that, you know, one of the emails that we all got, I do believe today, was about a mail out letter. I think that's a great idea. I think there's a lot of questions about people, and I don't know that everyone in the township necessarily understands the effect of what the official plan is, and how it can and how it can have an effect on everybody that's within the township. I think that we need to do maybe a little bit better job of educating everyone, so that everybody has a very clear understanding of what the cause and effects are going to happen here as we go through this process. And again, like I said, I would really like to challenge council to come up with, and, you know, our staff come up with a different way that we can somehow touch base or have a different mode of communication with our public, so that we make sure that we get the input that we need.
Maybe could I, just to partially answer that comment, in Jasmine, are you there? Jasmine?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, I just wondered, because I thought it was very good what you put in. I did read in this report regarding the link on our website and what you've done there. Could you just explain that, please? Because I think it's very important.
Yes, we did develop a kind of a question and answer tool. So members of the public can submit questions onto the tool, and it's on the official plan page of our website. And we'll take those questions and put them all into a document with the answers to be able to be downloaded by the public. So you can see all of the questions that have been asked in the past and all of the answers to those questions. So yes, we provided that.
Yes, and I think you also did provide a tool to the public. And I realize, Ian, that not everybody has internet, so that is definitely a problem. But maybe, Jasmine, you could also mention about the tool that you provided to the public for tonight to be able to ask questions.
There was an opportunity, we did in the advertisements that we put out, an opportunity to register to speak at the meeting virtually. Unfortunately, I didn't have any registrants tonight. It can be, I think, challenging and a little bit intimidating to register to speak on an electronic format. At least that's what I've heard. So I mean, we have provided those opportunities and we did meet our statutory, and you can jump in, Forbes, if I am incorrect at any point. We have provided our statutory advertising requirements, but there's nothing that precludes us providing additional methods of communication to the public or any additional tools for communication and to get additional feedback.
Thank you, Jasmine. I'm going to go, so that'll be, I'll give a follow-up there to Ian and then back to Karen, please. So Ian?
Yeah, and I think that, you know, providing these opportunities for the constituents to go online and do these things, I think that's a great thing. I just don't think that we've 100% maybe gotten as far as might like to see. I would really like to see a mail out flyer or a letter explaining to the residents exactly what it is that what's going on, so that they truly understand. I'm not 100% sure that everybody does. And I want everybody to make sure that they're aware of what the consequences of, you know, tiny homes and all these conversations are occurring. I saw some of the emails back and forth between, you know, this afternoon between Jasmine and some of the public in regards to trying to get signed up for this thing. So obviously there's something is maybe not 100% foolproof there, and I think that Jasmine kind of you know, touched the you know, hit the nail on the head there a little bit. It's a little bit challenging, I think, for some people too, as far to navigate through some of this kind of stuff. I just want to make sure that we get as much public input as possible. It's a 10-year document. We don't want to have to pay for it again, and you know, input is key.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Karen?
So two things. One has to do with when we talk about tiny homes, we had mentioned about the mobile homes, but I don't think that has been addressed yet. Will that get addressed during this official plan, or do we still go back to the talk about tiny homes? The second one is about where we put it in the paper. Because of the different areas of Montague, some get like the North Grenville edition. Does that mean that this notice was also placed in that paper so that all our residents had access to it, even if it was in the paper?
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Forbes, go ahead.
That's something that Jasmine and I would have to review and make sure was addressed appropriately, Counselor. I don't have an answer for you on that.
It's okay.
So sometimes, that's a good question, Karen, but sometimes, Forbes, if you live in Merrickville or Andrewsville, you're not going to get the Montague News because they don't get because they get the Kempville edition.
Yep.
So it's always been an issue that we've had here in Montague. We've always wanted the local newspaper to cover, to put the same story in everybody's newspaper, but it hasn't necessarily worked that way. So it's a good question, but it needs to be addressed. And the other thing is that we've often talked that we don't necessarily always have to take out an ad, but and this is kind of, I'm wondering if it's too early to do this, but to partially address in your comment is, when could we do an initial newspaper press release letting everybody know that we've introduced the review of the 10-year official plan, and in that release we could do some pretty good explanation as to what is an official plan, what discussions are entailed, and what are the results, or what could be the results. So I think we could get some free publicity out, and in that way, if we did that, we would be getting the word out to every single resident, and it costs nothing. I'm going to go to, do you want to comment on that, Forbes, first, and then I'm going to go to Claus?
I think any efforts that council wants to undertake to enhance public engagement is an important thing to discuss.
Well, I mean, I would like to be able to suggest that maybe when we're finished the discussion, somebody from council could initiate it, whether we need a resolution or just get consensus for staff direction to do an initial press release on this. I think that would help to go a long way. So I'm going to go to Claus, and then I saw Ian, your hand up, and then Karen again. So Claus first, and then Ian and Karen.
Okay, first a question to you, Forbes, and then a comment follow-up. You were talking about a communal area for a number of houses to be on a communal system. Do you have any examples of these type of communal systems in the province anywhere that we could see that are working? They've done this and are working?
Yes, I'd be happy to provide that. There are a couple of examples in Eastern Ontario where they're being used right now, and I can certainly get that information to you.
Okay. Back to informing the public, because as most of us, and as Councillor Straight said, he got a lot of emails. We probably destroyed a couple of trees with all these emails we got and printed them off. How do we get in touch with some of the members of our residents who are not on a computer system, or how do they have, how is their communication going to be to us to communicate? We can't have a public, full blown out public meeting in the hall just yet, especially not before September 30th. So how do we reach out to those residents?
If we did the press release through the newspaper, Claus, then everybody would get it.
Well,
Okay, and rely on them to
At
send us a
least I would
letter?
hope that everybody gets a newspaper.
And there, we would rely on them to send us a letter or a phone call or something? I guess.
They would be asked to respond by questions and comments like every other way that we communicate. I think that's what we do. That's what we're trying to do, is to have people, have the public ask as many questions and comments as possible. And we're trying to get that word out in as many ways as possible. I only suggested the newspaper as one option of many. And our staff's already taken some pretty good steps. It's not, we're not going to get to everybody, but we can certainly keep trying. I'm going to go, yes, Forbes first, and then, yeah, Forbes.
I just want to stress that historically, before COVID, the majority of public input on planning wasn't necessarily at the public meetings, but were in the written comments that the public provided. And that's what we need to get the public to do, is to give us their comments. The public meetings are sort of it's an event where they can hear facts, they can hear other people's opinion. But at the end of the day, the most powerful public consultation tool is their written comment. And that's, I think, what we should be striving to achieve.
Thanks. So Ian and Karen. Ian first.
So, I would like to see a mail out to each house with a letter that says, this is what we're doing. It gives everybody an explanation what the official plan is, what's going to be in the official plan, what changes are coming to the official plan. I know it's going to cost us a little bit of money to do it, but we're investing the money in the plan right now. Let's make sure that we get all the comments as we can. I think the other thing too is that I think it's kind of like free publicity, right? It's you send out a flyer to everybody. Everybody starts to realize very quickly that our current council has a appetite for development. And anybody that was sitting wondering about, maybe we want to develop our land, maybe we want to do something with our land. Now it's forefront, it's right center, and it's right on their mind. They just got a piece of paper that says, our township's looking at making plans and making changes. We want to grow, and I think it's really a great tool to just maybe spark some interest from within our own community to help come up with some of these growth ideas that we need to develop.
So Ian, I guess I'm certainly not opposing the idea. So that's, I just wondering though, what would a flyer do? Because I also know what a lot of people do with flyers when they come in their mailbox, where they go. So I'm just wondering though, if a newspaper article, which would be free, said all of what would be in a flyer, then are you saying that wouldn't be enough or wouldn't be good enough or what? Because I feel that anything that would be on a flyer, a one-page flyer, could be in a news release story in the newspaper if they would do that for us.
I'd like to see a flyer personally. I think it's a little bit more personal. I think
Okay, so,
it gets to everybody.
yeah, okay, so thanks. Karen, I'll go to you.
Just a question on the follow-up there about the press release. So how will that get to those like North Grenville paper? Because I thought a press release would still just go in our local paper.
No, I would be, I would only say that if we were going to do that, we would have to demand and they would have to say yes. They would put it in both newspapers or 3 newspapers if the case may be, so that everybody would get it. But I'm going to go to Jasmine to comment on that.
I just wanted to confirm a piece of information from earlier. So I did confirm that the advertisement was placed in the wider circulation, not just the Smith Falls Record News. So it would have been in the classified section that went out as an attachment to all of the papers in the Metroland group, the area.
So Jasmine, if you were able to ask the newspaper if they would do a press release in like in both newspapers, if it's just 2 and they guaranteed that they would, like could we look into that?
So the way that generally works with media releases is that they have a choice to include it in their editions. I don't think that there's an ability for us to compel a news release to be included in a newspaper. If they have lots of other content, then it's likely that it would not be included.
So
if they don't have a lot of extra, if they don't have extra content, then they have. We've had, we've released a number of media releases, and some are included and some are not.
So if they wouldn't include it, then would we be able to, then we could still go to the flyer idea?
I'd make a recommendation at this point that if council wants to see a flyer, then that direction be provided tonight, because that gives us enough time to develop that and get it sent out.
Yeah, well, I think we've got a couple of options that's kind of being thrown around there is either a press release that would get into every newspaper, every household would get it, or a flyer, but we can address that before the meeting's over. So I'm going to go to Karen, please, again.
No, I'm done because that was answered. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So any other comments? Jeff?
Thanks, Reef. I guess a few things. I mean, I'm just going to throw this out there. I respect Councillor Straight's idea. Sorry, about the flyer, and I'll throw this out there because one of the things that we discussed that obviously earlier in the year, and the cost of putting that flyer out. I think we were talking like in the $1,200 to $1,400 or more range. So it's a lot for to kind of read Dobson's point, where how many are going to read that. The other side of it, and I'll throw this out to council. If we want to have a flyer out there, I'm game for doing it, and just do the quick math here. There's 1,600 homes in our township, which is not very big. I know we're spread out. There's 5 of us. There's 320 homes. So if council's up for it, we want to make sure that word's out there. Then let's each take a go at it, and we'll each deliver 320 flyers to the homes. So I'll just throw that out there. I'm not saying it's what we can do, but I'm just gonna throw it out there. If that's what we want to do, and we want to do it in a way to save money, and also a way to get out there and drop it out there. We want to make sure there's engagement. And council doing that could be an option. It would just take a day to do it. So if you want to, I'm just throwing that as an option.
So Jeff, I'm going to go straight back to you, but I'll just comment on your comment there, because when COVID-19 hit, we had discussions regarding the flyer and going door to door. And we discussed whether we do it, whether public does it, or whether our fire department, who was willing to do it, but had decided it was not a very wise thing to do, because you were touching paper to going into everybody's mailbox. So we decided not to do a flyer. And that was a pretty important flyer also. That was explaining things about COVID-19 and trying to communicate to our public, but we decided not to do it. So I'm not sure what would be the difference. I don't think there's very much different right now, especially the problem is that there is that possibility of a second wave. Things are still, I believe, on the incline from in at least 3 areas, one of them being in Ottawa for COVID-19. So, I love nothing better to make sure that every single person in Montague Township at least reads about this review. But I'm not sure that it's the right, I'm not sure, but it's up to council. We can do, have a consensus vote here if you wish. But I'm not sure that it's the right time to be doing a flyer, whether it be us doing it. And I agree, I would be the first person to step up and help to do it. But there is a risk because we're putting a piece of paper into everybody's mailbox. But anyways, I appreciate the comment, Jeff. So I'll go back to you. You have more.
Yeah, and I sorry, I agree, Reeve. I mean, it's sort of one of those options as far as of how we want to engage it. The other side too, as well as, I mean, we're at a different stage too, as well, than when we were discussing it also during the height of the COVID-19 crisis. Not that we're not out of the crisis, but that was when there was everything. We're in full shutdown mode too, as well. We're with being in stage 3, we're a little bit different case. And I just say, it's an idea out there. If we want to have a flyer out there, and I want to echo Forbes' point, because I think that was a big part of it. Is public meetings are great, and I was thinking sort of on that same line. It's a bit of, there's a show to it too as well, and it's great for people to come out. But to me, and I emphasize this, and I've emphasized this to even to some of the emails that we received today, is that the best way for engagement is conversations with us, individually, one-on-one, so you can have a two-way conversation with somebody to really get a good idea of what that constituent is looking at, and also sort of our thought process to try to get an idea of what they're feeling. And realistically, we're talking about, sorry, my thing just glitched there. We're talking about maybe so many conversations, but that's really the most important part is not necessarily, in my opinion, like the public meeting. I mean, I'm not saying we don't have one. I think it's great. But the most important part is people getting in touch with us directly with their questions or concerns, so we can have those conversations and then bring that forward to council, because that's our responsibility as the members of council, is to bring that forward and to bring forward the questions and concerns that they have. And I mean, and they don't have to call all of us. I mean, if they call any one of us, then we have that ability then to bring that forward, saying, I have this concern and question, and I had an in-depth conversation. It's hard to have an in-depth conversation in a public meeting sometimes. So I mean, that's why I'd really like us to make sure that we're trying to, if we're going to talk about communication, is really guiding people to say, get in touch with one of the 5, so we can have those in-depth conversations. And Forbes, I don't know if you can comment on sort of that sort of thought process too as well, because I know that was sort of where you were guiding towards too as well.
That's
Yes, Forbes, you go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor, that's the fundamental role of council, isn't it? Is to represent the constituents, and this is a project where that's front and center. And so having them reach out to you as individual councillors is a very, very effective way of getting their comments and concerns or questions put on the table. I would encourage you that if you do get somebody that has, good questions or things that they want brought up, that they take the time, put those comments in writing, and then they are part of the official record. And it's not a sort of a second party interpretation of what was said. But it's an extremely effective, it's extremely important. I would encourage it, but I would suggest that one of the approaches that the individual councillors take is to encourage those comments to go in writing and be formally submitted.
So, any other, Claus?
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. On Councillor Carroll's point here, engage conversations with the public and our residents and so forth. I did get a call from one resident, and basically, Jeff, what he did most of the time was just yell at me. And some of these emails that we all got, that they're suggesting that we shouldn't even have this meeting, that we should have a public meeting first, let the public decide, and then we do exactly what the public says without us having any discussions at all, which I don't necessarily agree with. But anyway, a question, Forbes, in regards to suggestion number 10, recognize the significance of the Rideau Canal which I just love, and the policies that to protect and the benefit from. What can we benefit as a township from the Rideau Canal?
Well, the Rideau Canal is your primary waterfront within your community. It probably represents a large component of the assessed value of taxation within your community. There's locks that are in and around your community that you have opportunities to take advantage of. That's something that we would have to spend some time and explore in detail. But I think, Councillor, the fact that you've got a UNESCO World Heritage Site within your municipality is nothing but a positive thing in terms of economic development opportunities. The Parks Canada has, over the last 10 years, developed detailed land use policies on how to best protect and promote the canal. And we would be working with their staff to come forward with options for you to take a look at.
Okay, I would agree. If I may comment just on that, Forbes, I do agree with you. Having the Rideau Canal as our border of our township is great and so forth. A lot of that section of the Rideau Canal is protected as wetlands. A lot of it is swamp areas. I mean, I live probably close to the best part of the Rideau Canal as it is by Edmonds Locks. And the rest of from there on down is a lot of swamp areas, very difficult to develop. And protected by High Water and Parks Canada and Rideau Valley Conservation Authority and all those agencies that have their say. So I think we're going to have to take a look at how we can benefit from it, maybe talk to these people and work with them, see what we can do.
Thank you. Anything else, Ian?
Yeah, for Mr. Forbes, item number 7, provide clear understanding of development constraints. Are you going to be talking to builders, et cetera, stuff like that, to understand what constraints they're facing, you know, what challenges they face within the township, maybe what policies we have now that don't really work for them, or something of that nature?
We haven't reached out specifically to the developers, though we've had some conversations at the staff level about how we could engage them. I think that their perspective is always very important to bring to the table. I think that point 7 is really, Councillor Straight is talking about clear language and getting rid of some of the planning jargon that official plans have that end up being a barrier, and it's confusing. And so I'm a big proponent, as I know your planner Carl is, of plain language, clear statements on what's expected to get from A to B. And I think that's particularly in the consent process category, a really important area for us to look at and make sure that you're doing the best you can do.
Thank you.
Thanks. So, Jeff?
I just gonna make one more point, because I know this is something that I remember discussing with Forbes too as well. Because I mean, I guess when we're doing the growth and we're looking at how much growth we want to do, and there's the cause and effect, obviously the stress that it all, like the increase of taxation, but the stress that also that's on the current sort of services we have. And I guess that's why a big point of our growth plan has got to be on the on really well serviced roads, right? Because that would sort of help ease the burden on our public works. Because if it's on, like, you know, especially if they're on county roads or already upgraded paved roads, or we want to avoid doing as any type of super growth on the off roads, because I mean the roads can't handle that. So I mean, like, that's I guess just to clarify, like that's more of a financial advantage for the township, because I know that's a concern of some people out there, where like, and we're never going to shut off severances anywhere, but it's more of like the focus on and making sure there's an understanding of why we're doing a focus on those areas, is because if we don't do focuses on those areas and we allow super growth in all the other areas, that's going to hurt keeping our taxation levels at the current levels, if I'm correct on that, Forbes, too, as well.
I think that that's a fair statement to say, Counselor. As a planner working in Eastern Ontario for the last 20 years, I've said more than once in public forums that severances are not a financially effective growth model for municipalities. They're good for the property owner, they're good for the builder, they're good for the person that lives in the houses, but they're not a financial cash cow or anything like that for the municipality. They're barely able to cover their own costs of the road in front of their property. And so I've often asked council, if you've got, going forward, if you've got one form of development that you know that you're losing money on, and another form of development that you know you're going to break even or maybe make a little bit, what are we going to focus on going forward? You know, we're asked to be more business-like. So you find out ways that you can reduce the financial liability of the severances and make them more efficient and effective. And then you look at other types of development that may be more beneficial in the long run to the municipality in terms of sustainable financial base.
So just to follow up.
Yes.
So
Yes.
So thank you, Forbes, because I know that's a concern of some of our citizens, and we want to make sure that that's sort of brought out there, because those concerns of increase of taxation as we look at growth is not sort of where we want to go. We want to make sure our growth focuses on not increasing our taxation. So I want to make, like, and that's a big part of it. We want to make sure that people understand as we go through this process, as we're looking at growth opportunities and we're looking at how we're going to do that, and also about how it can be a positive effect if we do it the right way, but if we don't, that it can be a very negative thing too as well. So I also will echo the appreciation from obviously Carl too as well, and Forbes, with the commitment to the plain language and the easiness, because I think that's a big part of it. I mean, I've in this game, the short time I've been in this game, when I've read a lot of say government jargon, there's a lot of stuff where you got to read it about 4 times before you really get around it. So I appreciate the commitment to the simplicity to make sure that it can be very easily understood. So
Karen, and then Carl.
So I understand what Forbes and Jeff are saying, but if we don't have the property owners that want to go further than 3 severances, they don't want to get into the subdivisions, how do we stop? Like, we just restrict that sort of thing from happening? Or, like, do we shut down the development side? Because if we don't have a lot of people coming forward with wanting the subdivision portion, how do you do do just that?
I guess we'll go to Forbes for that
Yep.
answer.
I think, Counselor, it's a question of having a balance, right? You don't put all of your eggs in one basket. You have a balance. And you also promote the opportunities that exist within your community. And one of the things I do know about the development industry is that they're always seeking out opportunity. And so if the municipality of Montague presents an opportunity for residential development, the development industry will pay attention and will look at it, and they'll let you know whether you got it right or not.
Yep, these guys know what they're doing.
So, okay, follow up, Karen, first.
Yeah, because it's more though that we don't have the land. It's the property owners that have the land for development.
That's correct. And so that your job is to present opportunities, to create a climate for new investment, to have policies that encourage certain forms of investment. You're not a developer, but what you need to do is you need to set the table to be attractive for the developer to come and sit down and have a meal.
exactly.
And I think that that's one of the things that we're trying to do, Forbes, through this official plan review, because along with all these discussions, we've already had many, and I think every municipality is having the same discussion. The province is pushing this, that we have discussions on affordable housing, which it completely ties into what we're talking about and what Karen's bringing up. You know, affordable housing is just that. You know, and there's a lot of different levels of affordable housing. I'm going to go to Carl and then to Ian, I think. Carl?
Yes, thank you. And I think I'd like to reiterate the comments that I've been hearing about the importance of public consultation, as well as the importance of plain language that ultimately speaks to the value of the process we're going through here. And this is something that Forbes and I were talking about earlier. We're not trying to create an official plan here that's basically just used by me and understood by me. This is a document. This is your document. We all want you to be comfortable with it, and certainly one that's broadly used and throughout the community, and make sure that everybody in the township takes an ownership of this. So I think it's important too, and certainly I've seen official plans that are so technical that they're basically just focused within the realm of the planning department. And I think we want to open this process up and make this our development plan for the entire community. And I think to speak to Councillor Carroll's point as well, I think one of the things I'm looking forward to the most in this process is, as Forbes mentioned, I'm delighted to hear that we're getting new mapping, we're getting new aggregate mapping, we're getting new mapping with respect to natural heritage systems. Because right now, and certainly when I'm looking at consent applications, and I have a number of policies related to bedrock, related to species at risk that aren't always immediately and evidently tied to conditions on the ground, and certainly there's a bit of a disconnect between how I'm applying the policies as they're written, and certainly when people who are looking to develop are reading as well. So I really look forward to certainly tying and cleaning up the mapping and bringing that, making it clearly. In my experience, most developers can appreciate the need for an environmental impact assessment if there's certainly a clear need or feature on the site that's there. And I think just tying all of these pieces together and creating really the most up-to-date mapping, I think that's, I look forward to really cleaning that up as we move forward. So certainly I thank you for bringing that point up.
Thanks. So I did see, I think, one other question, a hand up. I think it was yours, Claus, or did you have your hand up, Ian, also?
I did too. Go ahead, Klaus.
Oh, I think
Yeah.
you were first,
Okay,
Ian. You go ahead. I think you were first.
It doesn't
Go ahead.
matter, Klaus.
All right, thanks, Ian. Forbes, you and I had this discussion we had on the telephone conversation, and it's a follow-up of Councillor Jennings' point. We don't have land. The township doesn't have any great amount of land. It's at the industrial park. We talked about that. We have the 22 acres beside the school. That's not big enough for subdivision. And I agree with your point. Okay, individual housing along a road doesn't really pay the bills. It's large subdivisions or industry that does. So how do we get developers interested here to talk to landowners about potentially putting in subdivisions of significant size? Like, how do we marry that situation together? Because as you and I spoke on the phone, I gave you some examples. It's difficult, and they run into some stumbling blocks.
So, Claus, I'm just going to say that you've council's heard me say this before when we've had other discussions. We do have land. We do have land, and you've heard me talk about us hoping that we could look at this particular land I'm going to mention again regarding recreational opportunities. But we also have that same land that I keep talking about, which there is a possibility that it could someday down the road be a subdivision. That being that's 150 acres that we own, there may only be 50 acres that one could live on or could develop on, but and it's not very accessible yet. It's on an unopened road, but you can actually get very close to it. And I've walked on the property. So we do have land, and we do have land that we could develop. And again, like when we're talking official plans, we're talking a 10-year plan right now that's to be reviewed every 5 years. So we're talking years down the road. So we do have land that could eventually be developed, but that's the land up at Mud Lake that I keep talking about. So did you want to respond to Claus, Simon? Forbes?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think, Counselor, you've crossed into an area from planning into economic development, right? And I've had my feet in both worlds at the same time in the past. And I think a lot of it is promotion and just getting the word out that there's opportunities, right? And you'd be surprised at how quickly that word spreads out. You know, in North Grenville, in my time there, we became a growth pole, and it was through promotion and having policies that were streamlined and an approval process that was efficient, and people were happy to do business. And so I think a big part of being a successful municipality is being someone that people trust to do business with and are happy to do business. And so there's a need for planning policy, but there's also a need for economic development promotion.
Okay, thanks, Forbes. Ian?
I think that I was just about to actually kind of touch base on that, what Mr. Forbes just said. You know, I think that we got to really pay attention to how we cross the line here and what our expectations are from the official plan. Is it a planning tool or is it an economic development tool? And I think that we want to make sure that we, you know, kind of keep that, you know, stay in the right lane, but, you know, making sure that as we do the planning, that we're not putting any boundaries or unnecessary hardships on the economic portion of it, so that we can continue to grow. I think one of the challenges is, you know, how are we gonna do this to make sure that you know, we're sustainable at the end of the day. That's one of the big things. So,
Jeff?
Well, just real quick, I mean, like, just to kind of a bit on Councillor Jennings' point too as well, about the severances, and kind of to echo a little bit what Forbes is saying. I think a lot of the times too, as well, as people in our township too as well, they see the rule and they see what it is, and they're planning their 3 severances, and that's what they're looking at. And I think that's their mindset too as well. But if they had the options and the opportunity to step out of the 3 severance ideas, so if they have a big chunk of land, but they're going, I have to figure out how I can only do 3 severances and retain the rest because that's all I can do. But if the other options are there, and I think that's exactly what Forbes is trying to say too as well, is how we talk about it and how we market it, to say like, well, no, we don't want to do this. There's an option that you as a landowner could potentially actually make more money off your land, because we're not going to do 3 we don't need to do 3 severances. We're looking at doing multiple severances into making into those kind of subdivisions or those road access kind of ideas too as well, like Bauer, I think, up to as well, where it's just a road up and you have a sheet of houses on each side. So I think there's an opportunity to make sure that if people understand the different options they have and how it can be a huge benefit for them, the 3 severances will be out the window in a second for them, because it could be a better option for them. So I mean, I think that's where there is a chance for back and forth. Anyway, so I just got my comment on that.
Karen?
I understand subdivisions and development, but the people some of them that are looking at only 3 severances could be for family, because they don't want to get into the financial impact of putting in a subdivision. So unless they can sell land to a developer to have that go forward, and I think if that is something they're looking to do, they'd be in touch now with the developers, because of the growth that has happened in Montague and the development that went on with Bristow, for example, where Bristow sold their property. So I think it's there. I mean, maybe we do need to market it more, but it certainly is out there for them. But I mean, we have to look at the options, because if we can't put mobile homes in the township now, you can't have row housing, you can't have apartments, you know, like, it's not just about houses in a subdivision. So we do need to look at all those avenues. And if we're going to get into communal areas, then row housing would work with communal areas. So I think there's other things that we also need to address along with it.
Okay, thanks, Karen. So I see no other questions, no hands up. But before I go to the resolution to receive this report, I just want to go back to the issue about now, obviously in your report, Forbes, you've presented the next steps and we know what they are. but we've sort of talked about one step tonight, that I'd like to decide on by council, and that being how we could get the word out to educate the public a little bit more on what this is all about. What is the official plan? What do we expect to do? What do we hope from the public, and so on? So I know we've batted around a couple of ideas here, and I'd like council to decide through either staff direction or consensus. But I did point out that I'm just wondering if it would be okay with council if our staff was able to look at the opportunity of giving an in-depth press release with what we would hope would be in it to educate the public. If we could try that as a first option, and if that was not to work in the first newspaper, then we could go to the option of Ian, your idea of a flyer. Although I do think that there's problems with that, but I'm going to throw that to council now. So I feel that we can do one or the other, unless council has a different idea. But I know that I think that Councillor Carroll, you mentioned also about the cost. There certainly is a cost, and there's no way that a press release is free, and even if it was an ad would not cost as much as I don't believe an ad would cost near as much as a flyer either. But I've got two people first, and Claus, you were first, and then Karen. So Claus.
No, I'll pass. Go ahead, Karen.
Okay,
I
Karen.
just want, where does a press release go in the newspaper? Because if it's in the classifieds, not all the people will read that.
Yeah.
So is it
Well-
in the actual news articles?
It should be.
Or is it,
I'm not sure. Maybe we can ask Jasmine, because if she performed her wizardry, maybe we would be able to get it on the front page. Jasmine?
I wouldn't bank on that. Typically, a press release is presented as an article in the actual newspaper itself.
Good.
I do believe that would get read more so than classifieds, because I know I don't even read that.
Well, I'm just wondering if we were able to ask for that first, and if they refused it, then we could have another step. But
I would recommend that council be clear in your direction tonight and say we would like a news release and a flyer release, because of course it could be the exact same information. So a news release wouldn't be any extra work if we were also doing the flyer. I would recommend that you be clear in your direction tonight.
Yeah, and that's why I'm bringing it up again. So Claus, back to you.
I would in favor probably a press release to start with, and that, and make sure we cover the areas that Councillor Jennings was talking about in the Kemptville area.
So, okay, so I guess I'll just go around then and ask, see if we have consensus to do that first. If that did not work, Claus, then what are you saying?
And we'd have to go to the flyer.
Okay, so I'm going to go around the council and see if we have any consensus here. So, Jeff?
Yeah, I'm game with that, yeah. Can I ask one quick question though? How much?
Yes, sure.
How much does it cost to put what did it cost us to put the notice in the newspaper? Not the press release, but the last thing we had to put in. What did that cost us? Do you know, Jasmine, offhand?
Don't know offhand. However, from my past experience with advertising, like it's to do a 2-week advertising would be similar in cost. I'm not going to say 100% dollar for dollar to print out and mail to residents. And I'm going to recommend again that we not make a contingent direction tonight. If we're going to do it, let's make the direction to do it rather than contingent, because if we wait for the article to potentially be in the newspaper, we're delaying it by a week.
Yeah.
Just a follow up, and maybe going forward, because I think we have that in our bylaws too as well. And maybe I just want to throw it out there, but that maybe we need to change our bylaws. If it costs the same of putting something in the newspaper, than for us to mail it out, maybe we need to change our bylaws and not put stuff in the newspaper and have it as a mail out then. If we think that that's going to be the option for a better engagement, I'm just kind of throwing that out there because I mean, maybe that's the better way to go.
It's a provincial policy based.
Oh, is it? Okay, sorry. I thought that was one of ours okay, my bad. Sorry. Okay.
So I'm just going around to see if we have any consensus here yet.
Yeah, I already do. Yeah.
So we've got Claus and Jeff. Ian,
I would like to see a mail out. I think if we're gonna spend the money, I think that's the best way to do it. So,
Karen,
I'm okay with the press release as long as it's in all the sections of the paper, like the North Granville as well as the Perth and Smith Falls, Perth if it's not Smith Falls that goes out for our other side that way, but just to make sure that all our areas do get the coverage from that paper.
so I do think that we have consensus here, Jasmine, to go ahead and do a press release. But we definitely want to have it in everybody's news, like every resident gets it.
Can certainly try. We can definitely try our best to get that in the newspaper, but I can't guarantee what content is going to be released in the physical newspaper. Like I can't make those guarantees. They print some, but not
the newspapers are always asking us to give them information. So
I just want to be clear with council. I cannot make a guarantee that it's going to be in the newspaper.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. Yes. Karen, and then Jeff and Ian. Karen.
Well, if it's not going to get to the newspaper, then
Now
I
we
mean,
have
we've
to
got to-
remember that Jasmine's already reported that this was in the newspaper for 2 weeks in a row, where people were notified that they can make. I think they were notified that they can also make comments and question or ask questions. So that was already in the newspaper 2 weeks in a row. So we've already started that process of letting every single person know. They've been 2 weeks in a row. They've been told we were having a meeting. They can ask questions and make comments. And we will continue to communicate in many ways. So, Jeff?
go to a public meeting.
I was just going to say, I know the media likes to watch our because we're so easy to watch nowadays. So if the media is watching, we'd love you to do a little story on how we're grappling with how we can get this content out to the people. So if you want to do that story, that'd be fantastic.
Ian?
I think that we want to make sure that we guarantee we get stuff out there. This is one of the most important things that our council has is our official plan, and ensuring that we get as much public input as possible is key. So we want to scrimp and save on $1,000 to make sure that we get input, then that's your choice. We just spent $30,000 on a feasibility study. So I don't think $1,000 is too far out there.
Okay. Well, I guess we've got consensus that we're going to go ahead and do the press release in the newspaper. Karen?
Can I change since we're not guaranteed to say I want to mail out instead? Because
You can change if you wish.
I'm going to change to mail out then if we can't guarantee it.
Yeah. Well, I guess my position will be then that I am in favor of trying to get it in the newspaper, but I think we would probably then all agree that if we cannot get it in the newspaper and they cannot guarantee it in the newspaper, then we can then we would go to the flyer option. So that would be my wishes. So right now it stands, and we've got consensus to go ahead and try to get it in the newspaper through a press release. But we would want them to guarantee that it would get into everybody's household. The only problem is, I'm going to throw this out to you, Jasmine. I have a question because, again, does anybody see any problems right now with doing a flyer, a hand flyer to everybody? Because we certainly had issues pointed out when we talked about doing a flyer before. Yes, Jasmine.
So I'm going to recommend that we do not make the decision contingent on the newspaper publication. I would strongly recommend that the direction be, we do a media release and a flyer, because we can do both with the same cost, or just a media release. Because we won't find out if it's printed in the newspaper, because they will run it in maybe some of their online publications until next week. We can have this prepared for, at the very latest, early next week. So we can have that information out and give the public more opportunities to provide comment. The later we push it, the less effective this communication is. So I would strongly suggest that we do not provide direction contingent on the newspaper publishing it, because it pushes back the process by a full week.
So we would not be able to make a phone call in the next day or two. And if they could not guarantee it, then we can go ahead and do the flyer.
Oops.
Sorry, I had a technical problem there. I didn't hear your question.
No, I just said, so we can't make a phone call in the next 1 or 2 days to the newspaper and let them know what we wish. And if we cannot get the guarantee, we can't then just go ahead with the flyer.
No, they're not going to have the whole layout for the newspaper ready at that point.
Karen and then Claus. I think, sorry, Karen. I think Claus was first. So Claus and then Karen.
Thank you, Reeve. I would have to tend to agree with Jasmine, because the way the newspaper works is they have space to print an article, they'll print it. And I've run into this before. If they don't have space, they won't print it. They put you in the back burner, and that's the way it is. So having listened to Jasmine's explanation, I would have to say I would go for doing them both, because if we do both, we're under the crunch here, folks, of September the 30th to get this information out and back to us by September 30th to move forward on this. So I'm gonna change my mind here and say that we definitely do both because of our deadline, September 30th.
Okay, I think then we have consensus to do both, Jasmine. Karen?
So, I mean, if it's not going to hit the paper till next week, it's going to be like the 17th, 18th before they get it. So we're just going to give them till the 30th. And then your mail out, how long is that going to take to get it out to the people?
And who's going to do it? Who's going to do the mail out?
I will do it in conjunction with our admin assistant, and I'm sure with input from Forbes.
Oh, so we're going to do it through the mail.
Yes.
That's the correct way.
And in terms of the deadline, I think Mr. Simon can probably speak to what council's options are in terms of the September 30th deadline.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jasmine. The September 30th was a date that I looked that made sense that we do it. We can push it out another week if you want. If we push it out too much further, I think that we lose the effectiveness of the media release and the flyer. So we could do it instead of the 30th. We could do the 7th of October if you wish.
Perfect.
So if we did, again, when Jasmine and I were talking about this, we were thinking of simply having a notice in the paper next week saying that the public are encouraged to get their comments in by the 30th. If you want to do the flyer and the press release, which I think is a great idea, then maybe we push it out an extra week.
Okay.
I would agree.
Is the council okay with the 7th?
Yep.
Okay, I think you've got consensus there then, Jasmine, also. So I think that's all. If there's anything else you need, Jasmine, you can let us know. But otherwise, I have a motion here that I'm going to read to receive this report. Before I do that, Jasmine?
So in the chair's notes, there is an opportunity for some public comment. So there are some questions that I have received. So if we'd like to do that now.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't really matter. Generally, we do that after this report, I think, don't we?
Yeah,
It's fine,
so
though.
it's not a right.
We can deal with the questions.
So I think one has already been addressed, and that's related to the flyer being sent out to all of the Montague Township residents. But I had an additional question related to, if this is the first in the process, why does the recommendation for tonight to conclude the official plan review and update for public questioning until September 30th? So I think, to provide clarity, the way that I understand it is that the recommendation is to conclude this meeting in particular. So just to provide that clarity. Okay.
Thank you. And everybody should also know that this was our first opportunity to hear our consultant introduce this to us. This was our first opportunity. So I think it's just basically, I look at it as almost the first step in a long process. Okay, so I have a motion here. It was, were there any other questions, Jasmine?
That's all I've received. I mean, I have
Okay.
received one that I think is, we can send out to all of council, but it needs a little bit more of a stronger look from our planner.
Do you know if you received those, just sort of being a bit inquisitive here, do you know if we received those 2 questions because of us putting the notices in for the last 2 weeks?
I'm not sure. I don't know if I'd be able to answer that question.
Yeah, because I don't, it's certainly not very many questions or comments to be received by us having, with it having been in the newspaper already 2 weeks in a row. So we certainly didn't get much response. Hopefully we'll get more, but we certainly didn't get response the first 2 times from it being in the newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
Jasmine?
I would recommend, as we read the next motion, because the deadline has been changed, there may be a motion to amend that, the recommendation, so which forms the next resolution. So I know the consensus has been to extend it to October 7th, so we may want to, a member of council may want to put forward a motion to amend.
So I'll open that up to council. Claus, and then Claus?
I'll make the motion to amend that.
Okay, and Ian, you're seconding it?
I'm seconding it.
Okay, so any comments then? All in favor of that? That is carried. So then the motion will read, I'm going to read it. I'll read it out, Jasmine, and you can let me know if this is okay as amended. So this motion was moved by Ian Straight and seconded by Claus Vandermeer that council receive the following report. The JP2G Senior Planner Forbes Simon OP Review Report. And that the following be approved, that council conclude the special meeting on the official plan review and update, and request that the public submit comments no later than September the 30th.
The October 7th because it's been amended.
Okay, October 7th, 2020. Further, that the consultant be directed to conclude agency and public consultation on the official plan review by, again, October the 7th.
Yes.
2020, after which the consultant is to present an issues and options report to council for further deliberation. So we can vote on that as it is then, Jasmine?
Yes.
All in favor? That is carried. Okay, so we don't need to do another motion then, do we, Jasmine?
No.
Thank you. Then I also have a motion then. Well, before we do adjourn here, I just want to again say thanks to Carol for being with us, and also Forbes for all your work. And I believe that this was a very good discussion and a very good initial introduction to this review. And certainly we will all be looking forward to the next time that we talk to it. So thanks to both of you and Jasmine also, and any other staff that may have helped us on this. So thanks a lot for everything. We also now, Jeff?
I just want to make one comment because about sort of like the question that you asked Reeve Dobson about saying we only got one question. I just had a quick peek, but we do have 16 viewers on YouTube right now, which I think is fantastic that we have that, because that's more than anybody that ever shows up to our meetings usually. So
Yeah.
I think that's another good notice to as well, to say that, you know, we have a bit of a viewership. And I'll be intrigued to see how many people watch at a later date too as well. And I encourage the people out there to share that too as well, so they can kind of get to see what our explanations are, because that could be another advantage too as well, to listen to obviously Forbes for his explanation, and sort of our discussion too as well. Thanks.
And-
I just point that
And
out.
we also will look forward to seeing dozens and dozens and dozens of more comments and questions in the next, when we have our next meeting.
Yes.
And we truly do look forward to that. I think we've all commented that the more different options we hear and questions and comments from the public, the better decision that we can make, because that's why we're doing it. We're doing it for them, for the public, for the taxpayers. So we look forward to the next meeting. The last motion I have then is the move by Jeff Carroll and second by Claus Vandermeer, that this meeting do now adjourn at 7:41 p.m. until September the 15th, 2020 at 6 p.m. or until the call to Reeve, subject to need. All in favor? And that is carried. So thank you to the public for being with us, and to staff and council and our consultants. So thanks to everybody, and good night.
Right.